Welcome to Scanner School, session number 108. My name is Phil Lichtenberger, and this is Scanner School, where we help you learn more about the scanner radio hobby. Today, we are going to have a really quick podcast. So we're going to talk about the life and legacy of Rodney, Paul, Upman, Opitz. So if you don't know who Paul Upman Opitz was, he was the product manager and director of Uniden America. Paul was very instrumental in guiding the scanner radio hobby when it came to Uniden product. He was very active on the radio reference forums, and it was basically the person behind the company. That was kind of what Paul brought to the hobby. And it's very interesting to see how he did this, and he gave, a way for the company to communicate directly with the hobbyists that were buying the product. It gave the hobbyists and the users a way to interact directly with the company. And this was something that, the scanner radio market needed, and Paul was there to deliver. So let's talk about, the man that Paul was. And one of these things, too, it's, you got to remember with these podcasts, they're scheduled. So even though Paul passed away on December 28th, 2019, and this podcast isn't going to go live until January 14th, 2020. So it's been a couple of weeks since Paul's passing, and the sudden news that we kind of all received as part of the scanner radio hobby. So again, like I said, Paul passed away December 28th, 2019, and all the information basically that we're going to go through right here today is just going off of Paul's LinkedIn profile. So I never met Paul personally, although I did exchange a couple of messages with him or a couple of emails. I remember Paul being on board when I did my SDS100 video of the live unboxing. He showed up, so it was always cool to see that he was interested in what was going on here. But what he did for the hobby was really remarkable. So let's take a look at the legacy and the history of Paul Opitz, and let's look at how he got started with being where he ended up, as his final role in the market. So Paul, besides previous jobs, the earliest record that he has in his LinkedIn profile that kind of relates to the scanner radio market started back in March of 1981, where he spent 4 years working for Radio Shack as the product support representative down in the Dallas-Fort Worth of Texas area. From there, he graduated up to a technical specialist, where he spent some time from June 1985 to June 1987. June 1986 to June 1987, where he spent basically a year working as a group manager. And then that following year, he spent time as a senior technical writer. So from June 1987 to January 1997, that's 9 years and almost 8 months he spent doing that. So basically what that means is that if you bought a Radio Shack Pro, whatever series scanner, chances are very good that Paul had some ink on the paper writing the manual for that radio. He might have done some other stuff in the background for that, but as a senior technical writer, that was probably what his role was in there. From there, he graduated up from January 1997 to September 2001. He spent 4 years and 9 months working as a product manager for Radio Shack, and then eventually his last position with Radio Shack, which in total lasted for over 22 years. He was a director of product development, where his LinkedIn profile says that he was responsible for the development activities of the Connecting People group. 3 product manager direct reports averaged 500 products per year. Now, again, he spent from September 2001 to June of 2003 in that role. So from there, he went over to Uniden, where we all kind of know him from, right? So he started there as a project manager, where he went from August 2003 to September 2010. That was 7 years. So think about his known alias on Radio Reference. He goes by the alias of Upman. Well, what does Upman probably stand for? Uniden Product Manager. So that's where you get the Upman from. After 2010, after 7 years of spending time as the Uniden project manager, he was upgraded to a senior project manager, which was a nice little bump for him. Spent 3 years there. And then from September 2013 until his passing, he was a director of marketing and product development with Uniden. So he spent 16 years and 6 months over at Uniden. So from there, I mean, he was responsible for laying the land when it came to the Uniden scanner product. So the HomePatrol, the HomePatrol 2, the HP 436, 536, the SDS100, SDS200, right? These were all a product of what Paul was working on, right? Working with radio reference to get the database working and connecting and all that stuff too. These were all things that Paul had on his plate. Again, like I was saying, is Paul was basically the interface between Uniden and the consumer market. And what was really cool with what he did was he would change the avatar or his user profile image on radio reference to kind of tease you that if something was coming. So sometimes it would be like a drawing of a box, and it would say TBD or waiting acceptance or something to those lines. I forget exactly how it was, but I just remember there being like a box. When we were waiting for the SDS200, that's kind of what it was just a square box, and it'd be like a little patch on the back that said FCC ID or something like that. So he always had some little trick up his sleeve just to dangle that carrot in front of our faces. And one of the things, too, that Paul always had a sense of humor, and you can even see, to those last days, how he was still, Paul was still Paul. So Paul getting sick, he passed away of losing a battle with cancer, and it was a battle that he fought publicly, and it was quite some time that he was ill with it. So he started his own blog, which I would frequent regularly just to keep tabs of what was going on with Paul because, as somebody in the hobby, it was just nice to see that he was updating and keeping everybody informed. And that's the ironic part here, was because his website is actually called massivelyuninformed.me. He started the blog, it was basically the throat blog, back in September 12th, 2017, where he started talking about how he was having pain in his throat and how that quickly escalated into him having a tumor and how it was growing and how they were going to proceed as far as treatment and everything else. And it goes to the stories on how he lost his voice and then how things spread and how, unfortunately, the cancer took over his body. The thing, though, that's really, a little bit unnerving, I guess, now looking back to it, it was his last entry. His last entry was December 13th, 2019. And it basically says, "A New Low" is the topic or the title of his post. I want to read his last post here so we can see just how it was. It's a very short post, unfortunately, and you can hear that, Paul is just, he's just out of energy at this point. So he writes, he goes, "Well, last Wednesday, my first stop was to my medical oncologist who reviewed my labs. He felt that the two of my labs, but primarily calcium, warranted me to be admitted to the hospital. But before that, I had my last whole brain radiation. I was able to walk to the lobby, but when they came to get me, I had to have them bring a wheelchair to wheel me in and then back to my car. So after radiation, I drove over to the ER to get a room. I stayed in for a week." And he's got a frowning face emoticon there. "I was basically locked into the bed because the nurse and tech were both busy all the time." And in parentheses, he writes, "And they had to put a belt on me, get me out of bed, and get me shuffling down the hall. I know because that is what the physical therapist did." He closes out his parentheses there. "So I got weaker and weaker instead of better. But my labs looked better, so they released me this Wednesday. I'm able to shuffle around the house, but I'm being very careful. Getting a little better every day, but it's still the lowest energy stamina than, well, ever. Hard to get off the couch, hard to stay awake, eating through a stomach tube again, mostly, I make myself get up every hour to keep from stiffening up too much. Trying to get to actually going further than the mailbox. Wish me luck. That is Paul's final post on his blog. Again, massively uninformed.me. Paul passed away December 28th, 2019. He was born February 15th, 1960. At the age of 59, we lost one of the best minds when it came to the scanner radio market. Radio Reference has pages and pages and pages on the forum that announced Paul's passing. And it's been a large memorial, I guess to say, for the man that he was. So we're going to end the podcast here. I know it's kind of a downer, but we really needed to acknowledge, what Paul did, how he changed the hobby, his creations, and the hole that needs to be filled here. I mean, there's going to be huge shoes, to be the next Paul Opitz. There isn't going to be another Paul Opitz, right? Paul was Paul, and his character and his personality, his humor, and everything else that went along with what Paul did and who he was. It's you're not going to find somebody else that was Paul. So again, this podcast is here to remember who he was. So Rodney, Paul, Upman, Opitz, born February 15th, 1960, passed away December 28th, 2019. Thanks again, Paul, for everything you did for the scanner radio hobby. I'm Phil Lichtenberger, W2LIE. If you want to look at some of the notes for today's podcast, the links to Paul's blog, the links to the Radio Reference forum that has the passing of Paul, if you want to read what other people have to say about him, I'll leave that online as well at scannerschool.com/session108. We'll catch you all next week, everyone. 73.